Hello and welcome back to Read the World. My name is Derek Main and I review translated literature. Accompanying me tonight on the back porch is a cacophony. I can spell it but not pronounce it. Story of my life. Of crickets here in hot, humid, miserable, and COVID spiking North Carolina. America right now. So today is a big deal for me because it is the end of a trilogy, end of a saga, end of a journey that I took with an author, a translator, and an unforgettable character, and then a cast of characters. Today I'm going to review Virginie Despentes Vernon Subutex 3, translated from the French by Frank Wynne, and this is, since I could not wait for the American edition, and it will be another year, so I'm assuming probably late 21 before it's out, this is the Maclehose Press edition, an imprint of Quercus. So that's 3, this is 2, and here's 1. 1's the only, I think that's FSG, right? Yeah. And the other 2 are Maclehose because I couldn't wait. So I had them shipped to me from England. Okay. I've got reviews for 1 and 2. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about the stories. If you're here and if you are watching the 3rd review of Vernon Subutex, then either you have read the first 2, and so you know the story of Vernon and his cast of characters and the cult-like situation that he has set up in Paris, or you've already read 3 and you know the whole story and you're just curious kind of what my thoughts are, or you're not interested at all, maybe, I don't know. So if you're interested in sort of the kind of plot summaries of 1 and 2 of how we got here, I'll link below to my first 2 reviews. But I will note that my first 2 reviews were interesting. I mean, it's interesting looking back, rather, I should say, at my first 2 reviews because I was enthralled with the first part of the trilogy, and I was really sucked into the world. For all the reasons that you would be, because she is a tremendous writer. Frank Wynne is one of the best translators we have, and this is such a unique story. And being someone who came from a punk rock scene, it was doubly, triply, quadruply cool to read about this because I was reading about it from a Parisian perspective, whereas my punk rockness is on the East Coast of America. Well, and that's a past life, by the way. I shouldn't say punk rockness as if I'm about to go, start a band right now or anything. But then 2 came along and I liked it, but I had some complaints. And sort of chiefly among my complaints were I started to notice a pattern that the author would get into of introducing characters, and these characters would be so well fleshed out, but they were being told to us, not shown. So we would get all of the psychological profile of a character and their past and their mistakes and where they were today, but in the course of about 5 long paragraphs to open up a chapter and not necessarily like shown through action. And then the ending turned into sort of a weird action thriller. And I started to look at the series with a little bit of a critical eye. I started to see what Vernon Subutex was turning into, which was a cult-like figure, with a little bit of a critical eye, and just not sure quite what I thought. So I'm going to start off, before I get into 3, with some thoughts on the trilogy overall. Vernon Subutex 1, 2, and 3 are intensely readable. Okay? It is very enjoyable entertainment. They serve as a Gen X dream. I mean that in good and bad ways. And what I mean, because I hate it when people, no matter what generation it is, I hate it when people just throw out millennial or Zoomer, Boomer, without giving you a description of what they mean by that. Because generational titles are already in stereotypical territory. So you really need to define specifically, okay, what about Gen X do you mean as a Gen X dream? What I mean is, in Gen X, I found, and I'm just past it, I'm like the first wave of millennials, being 38 here as I record this in 2020. I found that Gen X found a lot of their identity in the music, movies, and media that they consumed. So the friend group and their social and political identity was very much tied into that. And there was a belief that this media could sort of transcend. And absolutely, we end 3 sort of as we started 1 with the belief, I think, of the writer and certainly of Subutex and his followers, that music could transcend and be more than just sound. And I'm not arguing whether that, I love music, and I think there are times when music transcends. I do not know if I could go so far as fully escaping into that thought that the media we consume can substitute for political action. And in many times, I believe that even the idealized version that this media we consume is going to push us towards political action can unfortunately sometimes fall short. Regardless, the important thing as far as the dream is the connective tissue to me of media, in particular music, that Gen X felt as they looked around in the dark for their friend group. And maybe every generation's like that, and this is my bad generalization. You're certainly allowed to disagree with me. I'm an idiot. Next thing I wrote, great character development, and that is the defining quality to me of the entire series. Virginie Despentes has a way of understanding characters, and I'll get a little bit more here in a minute about what I mean by that. But that is, I just used the word transcendent for music. That quality of hers is transcendent. It is singular. You just do not see that a lot in any writing. I was going to say contemporary, but I think we can say any writing. I mean, her superpower truly is understanding people, and so the character development is wonderful. It has a miniseries quality for this reason, and it's a trilogy, so that certainly makes sense in many ways. And it is obsessed with other elements of media, particularly TV shows, not so much movies, but particular TV shows. And in that way, I think that it shows itself as being a fan of that medium, and it belongs sort of conversationally in that medium as well. It'd make a fantastic miniseries. It is written at times like a treatment, actually. So let's go back to that sort of complaint I have about the way that characterization is done. Done so well, but always just sort of handed to you on a platter without the characters necessarily doing things to make us just understand as readers that this is their personality and this is how they would behave in this situation. The character is always going to be telegraphed, beforehand. So before a character does any sort of big action, and many times any sort of medium-sized action, we are going to be told right beforehand sort of the psychological profile of that character and the mindset that they're in that leads them to that action. And just for me personally as a reader, I kind of like to work backwards in that way and like to have a little more ownership as a reader over the text and my interpretations, whereas this does not provide a whole lot of that. And I find that is written sort of like a treatment. It is kind of telling you as a reader, as a producer, you're supposed to sort of make this film in your head, which is one absolute normal and awesome way to read. It's just not typically the books and the works that I read. So anyway, that incredible ability of her, Despentes, to understand people, but in particular, extreme or difficult behavior. So Despentes just does an excellent job with people that do not fit neatly in any sociological or geopolitical category. People that are outsiders in society and outsiders even within an outsider scene. And so she can deftly sort of create interesting right-wing characters and interesting middle-aged capitalist, and just really honestly across the board. She does a tremendous job, in particular with men. I mean, she seems to really get at the problems that modern masculinity has. I mean, the conflict that many men have with feminism. And I'm a man who also considers myself a feminist. I hope that doesn't offend you for me to use that terminology. I'm not a woman, but I use the word feminist the same way I would use anti-racist. I try to make, or an ally to the LGBTQ community. I try to make my actions, my words, my life, the teaching of my kids, my political dollars, my political action. I try to make all of that in service and in support of those people who are traditionally marginalized by me, a white male, middle class, straight American. So I really appreciate her ability to get inside the head of what it is that makes masculinity so difficult to express for some people in this wave of feminism. I don't feel the same way. I don't have an issue expressing my masculinity, I don't think. Although I don't have the self-awareness that Despentes' characters do for sure, so I could be wrong, but I appreciate that. Well, I mean, that segs into my next note, which is about self-awareness. Despentes' characters have an unbelievable sense of self-awareness, and it borders on truly unbelievable to where at times I lose the thread a bit. Because it feels like we are never given as readers a proper chance to develop our own thoughts on why characters behave the way they do and who they truly are, because before we get to that point, it has been explained to us through their own inner monologue and inner dialogue exactly how they are, why they are, and who they are. That self-awareness lends itself to some incredible insights into human nature. I'm going to read some today from 3. I think all of my things, as I finish this up, we're going to deal with death, male friendship, group dynamics, and addiction. All 4 of those things are key pillars throughout this series. All 4 of the things I'm going to read are very short, 1 to 2 sentences. And you'll see how she is such a uniquely talented writer that in 1 to 2 sentences, she can just absolutely nail those extremely complicated themes that many other authors would take hundreds of pages to get to. Okay, that's the skill, and as I said before, the superpower. The downside to that is simple. Our job as readers is not that difficult. Our job is done for us in many ways. That is a reading experience that kind of, remember that term beach read or whatever? I mean, I read these John MacDonald and Ross MacDonald, even in a sense Manchet, even though he's political. I mean, I read these things sort of, they're fun, right? And that's what Vernon Subutex is. It's fun. And it does not have that necessarily challenging aspect as a reader because the characters know themselves so well and the writer is so good at characterization that I might otherwise, or that I kind of miss. Okay. Excellent full treatment of modern feminism from all angles. And I think I got at that a little bit through the masculine side of it, but let's go now to the feminist side of it. We've got porn stars, transvestites, we have homeless women, lesbians, asexuals, we have strong, very strong Muslim women that are adhering to some of the strictest tenets of Muslim faith when it comes to how a woman should act. All of these different ways that a myriad of different women or those that identify as women are going to interact with the world. And if the way I just described that was messy, I apologize. I do these off the cuff. That's just the way I like to roll, and I don't mean to be offensive in any way. So all kinds of women, okay, that come from all kinds of places and express themselves in all kinds of ways and feel a responsibility towards their loved ones, those around them, and towards society in the vast, vast array of ways. And she writes them perfectly, so well. And that is a real treat reading through this. Again, there's not much of the mystery. I mean, at every point you do know what they're going to do because you've been telegraphed, you've been told sort of what their mindset is, what their background is, and what's going to happen next. But in those moments, you're still just getting a view of contemporary feminism and contemporary women and how they are interacting with the world today as they find it. That is a treasure. Wonderful. And so the last thing is very specific to 3. So in 3, something has happened between the first 2 in real life. And that something are some terrorist attacks in Paris, as you'll know. These terrorist attacks play a large role in 3, in the psyche of our characters and in the plot itself. I appreciate that all 3 of these books and the entire trilogy is writing about the world as it is, and contemporaneously. So it makes sense for these highly charged, very relevant events in Paris to make their way into the stories. But history is difficult because it is difficult to create a history on the spot. So we don't have time yet. Some of Despentes' writing on why terrorism exists is some of the best I've read. It really, I think, nails some of the nuance that is definitely missing in any sort of mainstream media, but definitely any sort of colonial media, right, or imperialist media such as America. I don't know about French media, obviously. So I appreciate that. But it's so close in time to now that I find it difficult to put these things into a story that already exists and then let that then sort of wash over the characters and then become such an integral part of the action. Let's go back to what I said about the miniseries, because I think that's how I need to wrap up this review. I liked this series. If someone told me there was a 4th coming out, I think I might pass. I feel settled, and of course, I mean, I say that. There is no 4th coming up, and you'll see why and whatnot. But what I mean by that is this was a good amount, and I found myself definitely in 2 from my earlier review, and in parts of 3 as well, feeling the same sort of tricks kind of pop up and seeing the same sort of philosophical messages, particularly a political philosophy, sort of pop up, and not really personally getting a whole lot of freshness out of it. The freshness that does come is from real-world events, right? As I said, terrorist attacks. And that reminds me of the miniseries thing, where something will happen in real life, and then a show, remember 24 or Law and Order, ripped from the headlines. You know, some of this feels a little ripped from the headlines, and it is. It doesn't diminish the work. It just changes the work. It just makes it a different kind of work. And I try to review and read everything on its own terms, but I'll just say that this is not typically the stuff I read sort of for that reason, because it is so present and contemporaneous, and I feel that we don't have that longer view to really understand how these characters might truly hold up in the face of something that we ourselves, no matter how talented of a writer she is, and she is extremely talented, can sense and see things as they're happening. We need that time in some ways, I think. I hope this has made sense. I'm actually going to probably not ramble any further, and I hope you see why. I hope underlying this you can understand that I enjoyed reading these books, and I like the writer quite a bit, and the translations I cannot thank Frank Wynne enough for, and he's one of the finest translators we have. But that for me personally, I end this series thinking it was okay. But let's get better than okay with our 4 aspects that I told you we were going to deal with in just quick sentences to give you a sense of the writing and how good she is at nailing these complex subjects. Page 33, death. It's no big deal, dying. People make a fuss about it, but when it finally comes, it's just a slight release. Page 66, male friendship. 56, rather. I went to 66 and nothing was highlighted, which was a problem. 56. He and Charles adored each other. A great friendship invariably entails an affinity, an intimacy, an alchemy as inexplicable as physical desire. They liked to sit next to each other and comment on what they saw. Together, they were never bored. I thought about that with my best friend, Ben, when we spend most of our time just commenting on what we see, and together we are never bored. Miss him. Wish we could hang out in person. Miss all my friends. Page 96, group dynamics. He is thinking that no one is solid. Nothing. No group. That is the hardest thing to learn. That we are tenants of a situation, not landlords. And we are, and these characters belong in history. As I said, for better or worse, I as a reader, it's a little bit for worse for me because of how recent and new the history is. But it's honest there, right? I mean, that is saying we are tenants of a situation, and the situation as the writer and as the characters found it. And I can appreciate that there's no hiding there. I mean, it spells out what that is. Last, page 145, on addiction. That's almost the definition of a hard drug. All you can think about is taking it. And when you do, you realize that wasn't what you wanted. You're constantly looking for the feeling you got that first time, a memory of that epiphany that never comes back. So you start over. And I want to end this review, my 3rd review of Virginie Despentes, and the final part of Virginie Subutex 3, by acknowledging that in those own words, it sums up better than I could have done my issues with 2 and 3. You're constantly looking for the feeling you got that first time, a memory of that epiphany that never comes back. When I first cracked 1, I couldn't believe the characters, how familiar they felt to me. Partially that was, as I said in my previous reviews, having grown up in a punk rock scene of my own. Mine was, of course, post-punk because of my age, but whatever. I knew these characters, I felt them, and I wanted to see what was going to happen with Alex Bleach's tapes. Thanks, everybody. I hope the crickets weren't too loud. I hope I'm not sweating too much. I hope something that I said makes sense, and I hope that I also was not offensive, because it is very difficult for me to sometimes do reviews in which I am less than enthusiastic. And so if you feel differently, let me know in the comments. Talk to me. I can always miss something. I'm not far, far, far from a perfect reader. Thanks, and be good to folks.